Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Patrick Sirmeyer, who is CEO of the Luxus Group. We're going to be talking about strategies to help young professionals stand out in today's very competitive job market. Patrick, thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, I'm excited to be on again. I know we chat a lot and we've gone over a lot of topics and projects, but you hit a good one for me when we discussed today's topic, which is really around advice and consultation for those who are getting in the job market and trying to succeed.
Absolutely. It's tough out there right now, especially for young grads. So before we get started, just share a little bit about your background in recruiting and staffing.
I'm currently on year 19 working within agency recruiting business. That's third party outsourced hiring, whether it be contract staff, full time hiring, consulting. There's different levels to engage. And year number 11 in business ownership. So I have some knowledge deep and some of it's just kind of a surface level. But, like you just mentioned, it's a unique time for a lot of people, depending on which industry you're in when it comes to job searching.
Well, I'll say it for you, even though you didn't say it yourself. You're a true expert in this space. And with the success you've had over the years, and now with all the success you're having, CEO of the Luxus Group, and like I do, that everyone has an opinion on the job market. Most of these opinions are coming from people who aren't invested in it the way we are, who don't make a living in it day to day. They come from a great place. But what I experience constantly, and I know anyone in our industry does, is they don't come from a place of great information and experience and knowledge. So, with that in mind, what are some common misconceptions that new grads have about the job market?
Wow, that's a loaded topic. I could go like a lot of directions. I want to start with something like actionable items that I would say to anyone who's applying to jobs. We have what's called applicant tracking systems. Any organization that someone's going to apply to a job, you receive that's called an ATS. You see a job posting within a website, could be Indeed, ZipRecruiter, or their own internal site. And as you go to post your resume and put the information out there, it's going to be received by a recruiter at our company or talent acquisition, another organization. What I find often is that there's so few people who have applied for jobs and they have not looked at the formatting of their resume. If I were to give you a screenshot right now, I have more than 40% of all applicants come through, and the name doesn't even come through in a field properly. The title doesn't come through in a field properly. Dates of employment don't come through properly. And if that stuff isn't received and you're one of thousands, you literally get missed. You get missed out on immediately because the data didn't port over. And I would just tell people, first of all, let's just go and look at the formatting of your resume because there's a chance you're applying and you're getting no replies because the data that you put in did not port over to the right way.
So this is an important point and a great one to start with. There's candidates out there who are applying all day long, spending their day doing that, and their resume is going into these applicant tracking systems with no visibility for them whatsoever, and they have no idea that's happening. That's probably the worst part about it.
You're right. I see quite often, I think it's Indeed and some others have this one click apply option. I cringe when I can tell that someone's done a one click apply because they're applying for irrelevant jobs based on some keyword searches, or maybe it's just some of the algorithms that Indeed had suggested a job to them. Once again, you're going to be in the cesspool of applicants. And I just say that because you can really change a lot just on solving the things that you can control, which is let's not do one click apply. Let's be specific on what we're seeking. And the stuff you can do afterward, like the steps you can take to be proactive or network or maybe be more aggressive to make sure you stand out, those are some tasks you can do. But just from the application piece, I encourage people, one, let's look at the format of your resume. Two, let's not do one click apply. That to itself is going to put you in a cesspool that you almost never get an email back for.
So avoid the one click apply, but how do you solve the resume formatting challenge? What advice do you have there?
Well, there's a lot of programs online. If you were to search for, I can recommend quite a bit of them, but there's resume formatting platforms that are out there that will, I think it's minimal, $8 to $10 per month, even just a one time. They'll give you some standardized templates. One misconception is the sexier or the nicer or with the design focused resume, you might think it looks nicer from some of the graphics that are on it or just the format, but the way that it's formatted won't help you in the application. Some of these organizations online, like it's very simple resume formatting with just the proper data and it's clarifying everything you need so that all that information goes through. I've actually done a test at one point where I sat in front of someone who was a hiring manager. This is in the healthcare business. They were hiring a clinical director. And I had put 4 resumes in front of this individual, a physical resume. This is early in my career. And I thought these people were qualified for the job. And as I did that, I had the individual look at them. I actually timed it on my watch to see how much time they spent looking at each resume. And these people were already vetted by us, so we knew they were qualified. And this person looked at each resume for 9 seconds before they made their decision.
I
Nine
believe it.
seconds. And I thought to
Okay.
myself, like, we spent a lot more time than 9 seconds to telling you who's qualified, but so many people are looking. We're just busy individuals, and we all are. And I think that finding a way for someone to very easily the information you're providing, comprehend it, and know within 9 seconds or less that you're someone they want to talk to, like, we have to be proactive about that as applicants.
So I think of applicant resumes one of two ways: either as a cover of a book, right? You're browsing books, you're trying to figure out what's interesting you, what you want to read, and the cover matters. We can say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all judge books by their cover. That's why the covers are so important. And the other way are headlines, whether it's a magazine or a newspaper. I'm dating myself by saying that, but even headlines on a Google search, right? That
Yes.
headline makes all the difference. What's going to make you want to click is the same way you should think about what is going to make that viewer of the resume want to dig into the details.
That's a really good way to say you can't fool anyone when it comes to the resume. We oftentimes get applicants who have resumes that are 7 and 9 pages long, and I think their intent was, if I overwhelm this person with the amount of data I have on my resume, I might get selected. But I mean, no one's offering jobs on the spot like that. You still have to interview and be selected. So you're right. A cover of the book is a perfect way to say it. And I think after you've gotten notice from the cover of your book, your resume, you should have something else that you can do, or something you have online, or some other content, or something that would elaborate who you are from that point.
I often describe or think of a resume as having one purpose, which is to get you to the interview stage. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think, let me say to your point, yes, I agree that getting you to the interview stage is correct. But we're talking about right now a status where so many thousands of people are applying for certain jobs. I think hurdle number one is, can we get noticed and receive a um, personalized email or call back about a job first? Because at that stage, now you get a chance to even showcase even further from your reply email, maybe some content. Like, for instance, you might reply back to an employer with interest saying, "Hey, I really appreciate your time and effort." And you could find this, you could actually create a template through ChatGPT, but hey, I really appreciate your interest in me. I did some research on your organization. One of the things I saw about the job that made me want to apply was this. I feel as though I've got these skills, and I feel as though I want to learn and get better in these skills. And I'm hoping working for your company could help me. Like, just that would be a 5-minute read email that would, the person who sent that, the hiring manager, director, whoever it might be, would read that and go, wow, this person's really vested already. Like, we've got to interview this person. So
Yeah, I love that you said that. So let me rephrase what I said a minute ago. Rather than get to the interview stage, it's to get to the next stage, whatever that might be. So maybe it is a reply to say, "Hey, thanks for sending your application. We think you're a potential good fit. Tell me more." Or at
right.
least catch someone's attention beyond that 9 seconds. Because if you don't catch it in that time frame, you're gone forever. One of the things that I heard recently from a guy named Stephen Greed, who's the CEO of Beam Jobs, and that's who I recommend for resume formatting. We really like the way they do things over there. He said, make a point of mentioning the company's name on your resume.
Mm,
Great
okay.
way to catch company's attention, right? If you're reviewing that resume and you see that in the summary or the objective statement, it's going to catch your attention because you know it was personal. And that's what this one click apply is really stripped away from the application process. Nothing's personal, nothing's meaningful, really. And so we don't put much value on it. So that's what I encourage candidates to do, whether it's, I don't really like the term cover letter. I think that implies it's sort of a dated thing that implies multiple paragraphs, but find a way to share your cover story. And that could be so many different formats today, from a handwritten note to a LinkedIn message to an email, as you alluded to, or maybe even in the summary of your resume.
I think you're right. I think about the idea that for every applicant you have to consider out there, there are people who are underqualified for the job, overqualified, and then properly qualified. The ones who are properly qualified, the algorithms will pick up, and you'll most likely get selected in that small percentage. But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people searching for work who are out of work. They're overqualified for a job, but they're humble enough to go, "Hey, I recognize what the job market is. I do need employment. I have the skills, and I'm even willing to do more for this organization with these skills. but I'm being overlooked because fear is if you were to consider me, I'm going to leave for the next highest paying job. But the idea, in my opinion, is if you're an overqualified individual and you're applying for a job, one of the things you should do is take the time to evaluate and write some information that shows where you can add value to the company. Because one of the things I do see lacking with applicants is they are more thinking of what can you do for me, employer, as opposed to them thinking, what can I do for you, employer? And I would rather see more people, especially say new grads who don't have as much experience, saying, hey, here's what I believe I can do and provide value, and here's what I'm willing to do for you. And if you give me the opportunity and give me the chance to prove it, I'm willing to do it.
Um, and that's what every employer wants, right?
Right.
And as a candidate, you have to provide what the employer wants because that's how you're going to be selected. Whether you decide to accept the job or not is a different discussion. You have to get there in the first place. So I want to ask you about the competitiveness of today's job market because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, our current presidential administration, they love to talk about how low the unemployment rate is, giving the implication that it's a great job market. You
Mhm.
and I know the reality is somewhat different. So why is it important for candidates today to stand out? If you're a new grad, why is it important to stand out in today's job market?
First of all, those statistics are skewed. We could have a whole nother podcast about the factors that we're not considering. First of all, the people who haven't been employed a long time, those have gone to the gig economy at 1099. I mean, there's just so many factors within that. But if you're a new graduate and you're now looking at employment and you're trying to figure out a way to differentiate yourself, we just got done talking about the topic of applying for jobs. I would actually first say throw that out. Sure, you can go apply for a job, but if unless you're a licensed professional, which depending on what that profession is, there's such a demand for that. If you're going to be in a status where there are some just subjective qualities in which the employer is seeking, you have to find uniquely creative ways to go out there and market yourself. First one I would say is networking, and not just general networking. The first thing most students think about is I'm going to go to networking events and I'm going to go to all these local produced events that are within my city. I don't mean to that effect.
They're
Even
painful.
worse. I've been to a
Yeah.
couple and I've never gone back. First thing I always tell people to do is you need to get noticed, right? You go to the employer that you're interested in, you find some of the departments you're interested in, and you start searching on LinkedIn and you start connecting with those people. You connect with a short message. Hey, so and so, just wanted to introduce myself. I don't think we've connected before, but I love the work you do. And, I'm very interested in your company. You don't have to put your pitch out there, not saying I applied for a job, look at my resume. No, you're getting noticed. If it's a small enough company, they're going to have some staff meetings and go, do we have any new applicants? And they're going to list off quite a few. And they're going to say, well, there was this guy named John Smith that connected with me. And now all of a sudden you start to get some communication internally within the company where people are talking about you. So I would say first you got to get noticed through some LinkedIn connecting. And I know this is like not for a lot of people, but I can tell you right now, if you're willing to have a side gig job, whatever it might be, and then go to an organization and say, I recognize that I'm not qualified, but I am willing to provide my effort if you give me a chance at a lower pay scale to start or unpaid to start. And if you will evaluate me every 3 to 6 months to see if I've learned the skills to be actually do this job on a full-time basis or to a relevant pay scale in which you'd pay a qualified person, I'd be interested. That's how much I'm interested in working for your company. I can tell you that I currently have an employee right now who came to me 6 months ago with that same approach. He wanted to get in the recruiting industry and he was willing to go for minimum wage to start because he had no experience, only to take 6 months to get paid up to a relevant pay to what I pay someone with experience.
That is such great advice. And it's such a small time scale that we're talking about that you can offer that for. And it doesn't have to be for 40 hours a week. It could be for 10 hours a week. It could be for 20. But the education and exposure you will have for that, gaining relevant experience is worth its weight in gold. And I know that a lot of people in the job market, maybe young professionals don't want to hear that, but you have to extend your timeline of your career and think if you spend 3 months doing that, 6 months doing that, it will pay for itself so many times over in the course of your career. I think it's perfect advice to give.
Yeah, when you do an internship, well, I actually get quite a few people that ask me for a paid internship. And if I were to offer an unpaid internship, they're going to go elsewhere. And I recognize it. It's better to be paid than not. But just keep in mind, like the ability to do an unpaid internship shows a lot about your interest and character and that piece. But if you were to do an internship and you go to the supervisor you're interning for and say, hey, in the 3 months that I'll be with you, I'm curious, what do you hope that I will learn or what kind of skills do you expect me to develop? Ask that of the person as you start. And then when you finish, have an exit meeting and say, hey, on 1 to 10 scale, how do you think that I've developed in those skills? And what would you say to me on that topic? So,
When do you think someone should do that? I mean, I wanted to talk to you about things that students can do, right? Because a lot of times grads won't realize they have a problem until they're getting close to graduation or have graduated and it's time for the quote real world. And then they realize, oops, my degree is not as marketable as I thought it was going to be. So we'd like to prevent a problem versus solving it. So what advice do you have for students? That's a great one to start with, the unpaid internship.
yeah, one of the most disheartening things as a college student is to get towards your senior year or close to it, only to realize that the degree you chose, it only has a couple paths. One, there's very few job opportunities that are going to be specialized within it. And then number two, what a lot of people do, they go, I'm gonna have to go get an advanced degree, master's, doctorate. No, and not to say they're bad. It's just that that wasn't the path. You deferred the path of career development because something wasn't just falling in your lap. And I think that's where I see the difference. It's just we're just not in a time right now in which things will fall in your lap. When I look at what someone can do to differentiate themselves, we'll go back to the networking piece. You could do that at a young age and start networking and try to find opportunities. Find people who graduated your college. I keep an ongoing LinkedIn filter search of people who graduated my college at any given time, and I just want to see what they're doing. If you had a 10-minute conversation with 3 people a week who graduate your university or your degree program, only to find out what they're doing, that's wisdom in itself. And people would love to give that advice because you know what? Someone might have taken a path that you're on and say, hey, let me just save you some headache. And I would guide you to go this direction instead.
I recently had a new grad ask me for help who wants to work in a certain industry, and I happen to have some connections there. And I offered that I would make a personal referral if he sent a handwritten note to someone who's very much in a leadership position in this industry. Now, I've suggested that to dozens of new grads and young people, and no one ever does it. No one ever takes that step to write the handwritten note. But you know, as I do, it's meaningful, it stands out, it's different, right? And that's what we're talking about. You've said that you want to get noticed. What a great way to get noticed because no one else is doing it, right? Go where the competition is not. Well, this young guy did it and surprised
Right.
me. And he said 2 days later, he called me, said, I did it. I sent a letter yesterday. Now you got to make the phone call, right? And I did. And the guy who he sent it to was so impressed. I said, listen, I did not obligate you to do anything. I assumed he wasn't going to do it, but I'm making the call. I've got to keep my end of the bargain. And he said, Pete, I love it. I'm going to call him directly. And this is a
Mm,
guy who is, like I said, is at the top of his industry
wow.
and
Huge.
made the call and is taking steps to help this young guy. And I love it because you and I know that people who are older, who are in their
Mhm.
profession, love seeing that kind of ambition in young professionals because that's what we want in employees. So we're
Yeah.
inclined to help anyone who asks for it proactively.
Ambition and the ability to look for creative ways to add value, it takes time. I recognize not everyone's brain is like pre-wired. I mean, you gotta think I'm 18, 19 years into my industry. So it's hard for me to think about as my 22-year-old self graduating college. I've also been in kind of the sales format. So I'm developed those skills and now I've got that confidence. But if I try to go back to my 22-year-old self and think, okay, I didn't have those skills. I didn't have that confidence. I think I was proactive. One thing I would say I was proactive, but not every young adult is that way. And I think that takes practice like everything else. And it will feel uncomfortable. The first time you do it, you will feel uncomfortable. And I think the second time it will, but you'll eventually break yourself with that. There's a story that Tony Robbins used to talk about. It was a real estate agent, and I don't recall, but it was in California. And this real estate agent was looking for a way to sell more homes. And he wanted to get his name in this really like lucrative neighborhood, but he didn't know how to break in. So what ended up happening was the whoever with the company was contracted to pick up trash had gone on strike or dropped the contract. And so this really nice neighborhood actually went probably a month. Trash is piling up in the front. It's getting really smelly. And so what this guy did was actually Tony Robbins was the one that gave him this advice, but this guy went ahead and he paid out of his own dollars to have the trash picked up, and he didn't even tell anybody about it. But then later on, when the neighborhood was actually clean, he started to network and meet some people, and he let them know that I did that as a value add. Well, he ended up over the course, I think, selling like 20 or $30 million worth of homes over the course of years within this neighborhood, all
Love
because he did something that was a pain point for them. He found it. He did it on his own dime and dollar, and he created value there. And then there was something else he was looking for that they were willing to trust him with. And I think the same thing goes for a new graduate or someone applying is like, go and find a mentor or a person that you want. And what can you do for that person? Like, what else could you do for that individual that they have a pain point for? And then you get their attention.
Yeah, and we want the income, right? As anyone who spends time wants to be paid for it. But what you're going to be paid when you're starting out is relatively little, even if it is at the current wages for what new grads are getting. And you have to consider that the person who's willing to take you on as a mentor, or if you're going to be an intern, they're investing a lot of time and effort in you even before they actually write you a check. So that is what I think is so valuable, is the ability to learn. I mean, you could almost make a case, and this might sound silly, that that's worth paying someone for, right? I mean, I know what's in my head and the experience that I have, that if I could impart on someone just coming out of school, or if someone in my position now could have imparted that on me coming out of school, it was definitely worth more than what I learned in college. But I didn't
Ev-
have that perspective then, right? You have to have the experience in order to benefit from it.
I'd say I've told every employee that's come to work for one of my companies, I say, look, we've agreed to a wage in which you started, and we're going to evaluate you every quarter and your performance and every year for some type of compensation change. And I tell them this early on. What I would encourage you to do is you should get to a point in that yearly or quarterly evaluation where you are compelling me to want to change that compensation structure for you in a positive way. I said, what you need to be able to do is that when I come to the table and we have those evaluations, that I realize that the odds are tilted way in your favor. You've done so much for the company that's measurable and that we've talked about that it's almost like you don't even ask for it. Like it should be evaluated in that fashion. I see way too many people that are just, as I mentioned earlier, they're looking for like, what will this company give me? What will they do for me? And they're comparing all the benefits, and that's fine. I get that. I would rather be in a spot where I've given more to an organization they've given me, because I just feel like I'm in the power seat the whole time. And maybe that's something I've developed over years, but that's what I encourage people to do. So,
Yeah, and it's been a popular sentiment over the past few years to not have that attitude and perspective. But I think the pendulum is swinging the other way. I mean, I really have a lot of faith and confidence in what I'm seeing from Gen Z. I'm biased because my 4 kids are Gen Z. And so I'm
yeah.
around their friends a lot. I'm very encouraged. I have a bunch of Gen Z employees now, and they are taking that approach. But be careful what you see and hear on social media suggesting you do otherwise. By doing more, by going above and beyond, which is such a tried and true thing to apply, you have more power than you realize. Because when companies downsize, make cuts, that's happening a lot these days. They're not cutting the most valuable employees. They're cutting the ones
Wow.
who are at the bottom of the list. And not only do you not want to be that, you want to be the one that they're fighting to keep. And the
Yeah.
way to do that is to go above and beyond. And it seems so simple on the surface, but it's not done frequently enough. Why do you have a thought on why that is?
One of the things I think about is, I think I said to you earlier before we started recording, we're in a time right now where we don't measure experience based on time anymore. Okay. So you don't say, I have 10 years of experience and you have 12 and you have 15, and who's more qualified or who has, better knowledge. We're in an accelerated learning in the world we live in. Someone can come and learn as much as I've learned in 2 years at my 18. Now, to do that though, they have to consume all the right information. They have to have a path to consume that. That could be YouTube and videos and mentorship and physical work. And there's just a lot of facets to be able to get yourself to that point. But that ambition though, I don't see as much. And it might be because so many things about our world are convenient right now. One thing I was telling you earlier is I would love to see every young adult, high school to college, pick a path. One other thing I find is, if you don't pick a path of what you want to pursue, of something you're working towards, that is where you start to waver in life. And sometimes when you're young, at least when I was younger, if I was wavering and I didn't have a path of something I was working towards, that's when just negative things started to happen in my life. But I've gone down a lot of paths where I've like worked towards something. It didn't work to the level I wanted, but I had a lot of knowledge and experience, a lot of memories. And then I took a different path. And then that just over the course of time added up to the career I'm in today. I just look at many young adults now where I think, oh, if you just need to take a path, because some of them are so I don't know, confused about what to do. They do nothing. And that's usually what happens with people when they're confused.
Well, it's a conflicting message of thoughts, right? Because you do have time. You have this long runway. It's a phrase that I've used. You used it earlier before we started recording today, where don't feel pressure to know where you're going to end up, but it's okay and necessary perhaps to feel pressure to work towards that end.
Mhm.
And that does mean going 100% in whatever it is you're doing to figure out whether it is something you're going to have interest in, aptitude for, whether, if you're not good at it, you probably have to have that realization at some point, right? I always
Yep.
use the example. If I want to be a ballerina, doesn't matter how badly I want it, I'm just not equipped for that, right?
Yeah.
So that's a reality of it too. But I agree with you 100% that if you are going into college or you're in college now and your major is undeclared, your number one mission should be focusing on figuring out what it is you think you want to do, acknowledging that it's okay if you're wrong,
That's it.
right? Because if you find out you're wrong at 22 because you went 100% in that direction, thinking that is what you wanted to do, there is no real penalty, right, for that. You have so much time to make up for it. I mean, I look at your 20s as your freshman year, right?
Mhm.
And so you have that much time to figure it out, but figure it out by the time you get to your sophomore year, right? By the time you're 30.
Yeah.
So that's the lens that I encourage young people, including my own children, to look at that through is it's okay if you don't know, but
Yep.
it's not okay to not do something about it, right? You need to be figuring that out as quickly, as fast as and hard as you can, but it's okay to be wrong. And that sounds like a conflicting message at times.
I think we're more likely to see young adults now have multiple careers, more than 2, maybe even or 3 in the course of their overall working days. Also because that's going back to the idea of accelerated learning, like not gonna be that Pete or Patrick have 20 plus years in this industry. I mean, we're kind of hanging our hat on that. But like if another young adult says, "Hey, in my 15 years of working, I was able to accomplish this in phase 1 and accomplish this in phase 2 and this in phase 3." I mean, that's a lot of knowledge and that's a lot of experience overall. And we live in this time now where you can take those paths in different directions. You don't have to always go deep and forever and we just used to joke, 30 years with one company. I still you have employers that will service, and I look at their LinkedIn, I'm like, wow, this guy's been with a company 35 years. Such a
Yeah.
rare bird. I don't see that anymore. I've asked a lot of employers today, and maybe you can answer this one for me, which is I ask them, I say, how long would you expect an employee to stay with you to feel like it was a good investment of the time you spent training
Yeah.
that person? I ask that quite often and I get a lot of answers, but what do you think most employers in their 50s to 60s are going to say? Or-
I'll say that they probably give you an answer that's much higher than reality and that what
Yeah,
they would be happy with. I would guess they would answer probably in the neighborhood of 10 years, where 3 to 5 is probably more realistic.
it's it. You nailed it. 3 to 5 is realistic. They want 10. I
What an
just
eternity. In what an eternity. And it is a dated mentality. The world is moving way too fast right now for that. But I also think it makes sense to go in, with an agreement on both sides of, is this a good fit for now? We don't know what the future holds.
yeah,
And that's okay. This concept of loyalty is one that I talk about a lot. It shouldn't be part of the deal, right? It,
no,
it should it should be a day-to-day decision almost. You're not getting
that's exactly
married.
right.
It's employment. You're trading your time and skill for compensation. And the
Yep,
minute that doesn't make sense for either side, it should be okay for that relationship to end. And if we have that mentality, I think we'd be a lot happier. I'm personally a big fan of the freelance market for that reason,
yeah,
because there's no expectation of future commitment, right? Does this make sense today? As long as we still say yes, it's great.
and you nailed
And the
it.
second we don't, that's okay. It's okay to separate.
I don't think we ever talked about this topic. Your philosophy on employment is identical to mine. I say it to the employees probably at least once a year. Usually I say it at like a year-end party or New Year kickoff party. I say, look, every morning you wake up and you have to make a decision. Is this where you want to be? And I hope that you say yes. And then you're going to show it with your actions and your passion. But I have the same pressure. It's a reverse side where I have to wake up and decide, can I produce a business and a product and the ability in this situation that you want to work for, that you have opportunity with, that you feel you can
Yes.
grow with. And like if I wake up and I do my part and you wake up and do your part, like every day we just make that decision together. But you might come to a point at one point, you wake up one day and say, this isn't for me. And then I can feel good about it because we've made that decision every day up until now. and we're just going to part ways amicably. So,
And the truth is, it would be hypocritical to suggest otherwise
yeah.
because I've quit every job I've had except for this one. You only end your career having not left one job, either through
Mm,
your own choice or someone else's.
yep.
So there's a natural end to things, and we have to be okay with that. But I want to get back on track, and because you mentioned skills earlier, talk to me a little bit about skills you think young professionals need to have. And which skills are most important for young professionals to have in today's market?
So we're going to put technical related skills to whatever career that you want to the side. Because if you want the technical skills to whatever career path you're choosing, there's a lot of online programs that you can find that will help educate you on those skills. Like I mentioned, you can do internships, things like that.
So
But
if you
as
want to be
we've
an accountant, you have to have strong accounting skills. If you want to be a software developer, you have to have strong software development
yeah.
skills,
So
right?
in our
But
conversation, we're making assumptions that you're going to have the skills or find a path to develop them. So we're going to put that aside because otherwise you wouldn't be considered. But now we're looking at things like what creates success between you and your potential employer or the employment scenario you're choosing. And that success comes down a lot to communication. So we live in a digital era where we do so much communication over email, text, and just different social platforms. And we would all agree that at some point we have assumed improperly or hurt a relationship through some form of text related conversation. I try to encourage everyone, my kids as well, to have live conversations with people and an idea of where you're trying to find employment or find a good working relationship. You should be proactive. Don't always rely on your employer to do that. Our good friend that we both know, Casey Jaycox, he teaches this format, and it's now ingrained in me. And I would encourage everybody to even practice this. He calls it TED. It's Tell Me, Explain, Describe, and it's just this question asking format of deeper knowledge to obtain information from someone. Instead of saying, "Hey, what about," or this, ask more intelligent questions. I'd say, "Hey, Pete, can you tell me about XYZ? Can you explain to me XYZ? Can you describe to me?" And by doing that, it's conversational. And whether it be the mentor you're looking for, the manager you want to work for, like ask those kind of questions and find out, like I'm saying networking, but be compelling in a way that you can actually have conversation with people that are important and giving you knowledge. One thing I always do on every email, no matter what the email is, I always send an email to somebody and I ask them a question at the end. I want conversation. I want dialogue. I want us to go back and forth, but I never make just statement related emails. And I think if you're just trying to network, you want to be able to do that same kind of concept.
I love it. A friend of mine years ago said, "Be interested versus interesting," and I think
Mm,
that's such a simple way to approach having a conversation with anyone. And you could talk to anyone at any time by simply asking them questions. If I meet someone for the first time and I tell them nothing about myself, I just ask them questions. I'm showing interest in them. We will walk away from that conversation and they'll think I'm a great guy
yeah.
for no reason, right? I gave them nothing about myself, my interests, my likes, dislikes, but I just asked them about themselves. And that is human nature 101. If you approach your business relationships the same way, try to learn about those you're working with, learn from them, right? While you're learning about them, that is all you have to do. And it is such an easy way to hold a conversation with someone without putting pressure of being interesting, right? Because that's hard. I, I,
Hmm.
I don't want to have to perform. That's stressful. You agree with that?
I agree. First of all, our favorite topic is ourselves. We want to hear about ourselves all the time. You ask someone enough questions about them, they're going to walk away loving you. Did you ever see the movie Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. You know that famous scene where the guy's getting out of the Ferrari, I think he's a stockbroker, and Will Smith's walking by after his rough day. And then the guy tells him, I'm a stockbroker. Will Smith was having a rough day, but like he didn't have to stop and ask this guy. He could tell the man was successful, but he wanted to know, like, dude, what exactly is it you do? And I
Yeah.
can tell you right now, successful people love being asked that question. In fact, there's a lot of YouTube videos where people just go around and say, "Hey, how'd you make your millions?" Oh,
It's just human nature, right? Which we can't fight, but we should pay attention to because that's how success happens, right? And we all have to be able to work with each other. Any other skills that come to mind for today's marketplace?
I add value for that individual. And I know, again, I'm speaking to the bias standpoint because I've worked in sales. Uh, Point being is like the skills of being compelling through sales and question asking. I would encourage everyone to just take some kind of course or get some kind of training to come out of your comfort zone because it's easy for me. I'm not a full extrovert, but I have extrovert tendencies. So of course I'm willing to be inquisitive and ask questions and dialogue and things like that. But if you're an introverted individual and you're thinking like, "Ooh, that would be like my worst nightmare," to go around asking people questions. I get that. But when I say network, I mean, you could just talk to your best friend and say, "Hey man, what does your dad do for a living? I'm just curious." And your best friend could be like, "I don't know, man. You ask him and you're playing video games with him, right? Well, guess what? Go ask him. Hey, I'm just curious. What do you do for a living? Why'd you decide to do that?" Like, come up with a series of questions that you want to ask people. The old book years ago was by Napoleon Hill, where he actually interviewed all these wealthy people to figure out how they made their riches. He was able to write a book around all these characteristics about that. Now, take that well over time, and now we have today different formats of YouTube where you can ask those same questions to people and find out where'd you get that. But that inquisitive nature, that would probably be the number one skill that I could tell someone to, if not develop, just be in the habit of practicing it.
So I have that book behind me. There's 13 steps, I believe it is,
Yeah.
that he talks about on how to be, successful. And what's so great about it is that book was written around 100 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's universally applicable today. The same things apply. The words and phrases may have changed a little bit, but how success happens has not ever changed in our modern world. You mentioned something earlier about the digital world that we're in. How much does personal branding matter to young professionals today?
Mm. I'm glad you brought that up. I think this is a topic. You and I were talking earlier about the idea of athletes and young athletes today. And we're living in this world that's evolving NIL, name and likeness, and the ability to make money from that. I think I use them as an example, like not a professional, but they're pursuing their athletic career. Like they go out there at an early age and they start to create a personal brand online and digitally, be conscious of what you're doing. I quite often Google my name to see what comes up in my first Google rankings to make sure that the content I want to come up because, I'm out there and relevant. But if you're in your teens, I know what's most likely is you just got some social media platforms and you're just posting with your friends and, where you went on vacation or what you did this weekend. I would encourage people to just be more conscious about what you're posting, how you're posting. And I don't mean from the idea of, hey, don't post something scandalous because an employer might see it. I mean, maybe go out there and create your own blog, write your own topics of what you think is important. Go out there and create some content around the things that you're passionate about. And, I've often tell people that, we live in this time frame where you can, I don't say create an avatar, but you can at least just put out there the information you want people to know about you. And it's important. You want to be found. We live in a time now where it's more skeptical when you can't find someone online than when you can. And
Sure.
so I understand the privacy. If I Google somebody and there's nothing on them, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that I think there's something skeptical about the individual as opposed to what I can find from them.
There's so much time spent on social media, young, old, it doesn't really matter. We're all living in that world today. And what I think is so important is to be a creator of content versus just a consumer of it. So yes, we're all
Yeah.
going to consume it, but find a way to create it to help your professional persona out there for lack of a better way to put it. So if you are a marketer, for example, show some of your digital creativity on there. If you're sales, make compelling videos. If you're in technology, you have opportunity to showcase that too. So each channel has its
Yeah.
own nuance. If you're thinking of that, I think it's such good advice that you just gave, and probably the perfect amount of advice is think about how you want to be viewed as a professional, not just as a person.
We seem to only like microsize that to sports when the reality is, guess what? As a young adult who's hoping to develop my career, I want to be scouted too. Come find me. Find me
Yeah.
online and go, hey, I want to collaborate on something with you because you're really good at X. And if you want to be scouted, then you have to put out content. Otherwise, you're going to have to be the one pursuing things, on your own.
And once again, you can this is something you can do while you're a student. You can do it in school. Put things that you're learning or apply
Hmm.
things that you're learning in class right now. Share your projects online. Start building your professional resume, so to speak, and professional reputation. Maybe that's a better way to put it. As soon as you can. I think that is great advice that probably very few young people take advantage of because they're thinking of the moment, right? Just like you did. You said you put yourself in the mind of your 22-year-old self. I know where my 18 to 22-year-old self was, and it wasn't thinking of what was going to be the best thing for me to do for benefit over the next 20, 30 years. That's for sure. Wasn't thinking that at all. But it's an easy thing to add, right? Put all your fun videos, but every once in a while, sprinkle in some professional style content, and it'll go a long way towards building that reputation. I love it. All right. So Actionable advice. I've kept you on longer than I told you I would, Patrick, but this has been so valuable. Anything that, resources or overall advice or guidance you'd like to give to someone who's either in school or has recently graduated?
Yeah, so here's easy actionable advice, and maybe it'll take you a lot of places from here. It's going to sound so elementary, but first, find a potential mentor. Your potential mentor might just be your parents, one of your parents, uncle, grandparent, neighbor, friend's dad, mom, whatever matter. Like it could be a person who's 3 years older than you, was in your fraternity and now graduated. A potential mentor for a short period of time, meaning like someone to bounce ideas off of and ask some questions. Be vulnerable to ask that person questions. Prepare. I would say, for example, if you're even say, we'll just use college because usually they're thinking of a career at that point. You're in college, you're coming up on your junior year. I know, wouldn't wait your senior year. You start listing some things of what you hope you'd like to do. You find, for instance, I often ask this question: what are you good at? Like, what do you have some skills at? Okay. What do you love to do? And we really hope that they're the same. They have some overlap and they're the same thing. I
Right.
find sometimes that I might be good at something and I don't love it. There's something that I love and I'm not good at it. Now, the question is, which one do you want to pursue? Do you want to go and pursue something you're really good at but don't love? I'd probably not encourage that. What if something you have a lot of interest in, but you have no skills at? That's going to be a hard hurdle. You're going to have to then take those lists that you're making and go, all right, I'm going to have to develop these skills. Or you go, I don't know what skills I should develop. There's where your mentor comes in. Find the person a couple steps ahead of you and go, hey, by the way, I have a lot of interest in this. I want to go this path. What would you do differently? What did you do that you felt like benefited you? What advice would you give me? What would be the top 3 things that I can do right now to, put myself on that path? And then you got to start taking those actions. When I say make a plan, I know it sounds dumb, but you just start with a list. You take a little action. Something about taking action in the right direction just puts motivation to it. And I often tell people, you operate by self-discipline and imposed discipline in most areas of your life. I find that when I was younger, I really needed imposed discipline. I needed to go put myself around people who would tell me what to do until my brain could properly grasp the idea of like, here's the path I'm on. Today, I have a lot of self-discipline in my life because I've had to develop it, but I have not as much imposed. But when I was younger, it was just all imposed. And there's nothing wrong with that. Go find ways where people direct your attention, direct your steps, and just follow them. I won't say blindly, but follow them with the intent of I'm going to go down this path for a few steps, evaluate myself, and then move forward. So actual items is put down a list. What are you good at? What are you passionate about? Let's see if they align. Go find yourself that kind of mentor coach and then ask for the 3 to 5 things that you could do to help put you on that path.
I cannot think of a better closing statement. So I want to end there because that was perfect advice that everyone who's young can take advantage of. Patrick Sirmeyer, Luxus Group. Man, thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Pete.
Talk to you soon.